So something slightly different today, where we're actually going to show you and go through a example of a pre-built project and talk a bit about how it was built and how it works using Unity's multiplayer networking. So we have a simple tank game using Unity and the Mirror library. So Mirror is a replacement library for Unity's UNet. It's a very rough scene with just some plants out and some rocks. And up to 4 people can join and battle against each other. Okay, the project's complete. You can download it, you can play it. Okay, but what we're going to do is go through a few different bits and pieces. Okay, so in the project folder, you have a few bits and pieces to look at. So you have the Mirror folder, which contains all Mirror's files. So Mirror is a replacement for UNet, which is Unity's old multiplayer high-level networking API. Okay, and you also have lots and lots of information about Mirror, viz2k.github.io. Okay, you have some examples, and this project was actually built off one of Mirror's examples, which is Tank project. Okay, modified and built upon. Okay, you have models, for those of you who don't know. The models in this package, similar to a lot of other ones, are built by somebody called Quaternius. Quaternius offers a lot of his models for free or quite cheap. I've been supportive of it for quite a while now. Just some really nice stuff. Both for prototyping, actually for they fit quite nicely into commercial games. So you've got power-ups, okay, rocks and flowers, okay, tanks, okay, and trees, okay, and they're used to give you this quite nice level, okay, along with simple effects and simple sky, which are again available for free from the asset store this time. Okay. And they give you this quite nice sky effect in the skybox, and there's some quite nice particle effects. You have the scene, which is this scene, updated tank scene. Okay. Some prefab setup, which we'll talk about in a second. Okay. And then you have the scripts, which again we'll talk about a little bit later on. So as I said, this project is complete. You can download and have a play with it. It has relatively few sort of moving pieces for a networking project, and it's designed to show you how to set up a basic networking project and also to discuss some of the bits and pieces that you use to share that information. So first and first, we have a main camera. The main camera has a camera follow script on it. Okay, that is just there. All that does is follows the camera, okay, follows a particular player that's selected, and go through and scan for instance, look round. It can follow, it can move around from different perspectives, and if the player moves, the camera will move slowly after it, which gives it quite a nice effect. The first big thing to have a look at in here is the networking manager. The network manager is we have a network manager object, and on that we have a number of scripts. First and foremost being the network manager script, which is a built-in mirror script, which controls all your networking functions behind the scenes. Things like the tick rate, okay, so for how fast the server updates. Okay, obviously, depending on the pace of your game, depending on what's happening, you want to change the speed. Okay, so I've got mine as a default of 30. Okay, you want to see whether it will actually start on a headless, so without actually any graphical running, show debug messages. You have the option to set an offline scene, so if your game can't connect, you have an offline scene. Okay. We have the transport, which by default is telepathy. Okay. So when you add the network manager, telepathy will come up. Telepathy is the transport system, it's the way in which it sends and receives messages from different players. Network address by default, obviously we're here using localhost. This can be passed from a HUD, which we'll talk about in a second, and maximum number of connections. So we want up to 4 players to be able to play, so we can set 4-player network connections. Okay, and then you have this spawn info, and the spawn info is the bit that you really actually have to pay attention to. So you have your player prefab. Okay, so player prefab is the thing that's going to spawn for each player. Okay, so this leads to our tank prefab. Okay, so every player will spawn in a tank. Okay, we auto create a player, so every time we go through, we automatically create a player. Okay, and we have player spawn method set to round robin, which basically means that for each spawn point, which again we'll discuss in a second, each spawn point it picks a new one and then just goes round in a circle. Okay. And then we have a list of other things that are allowed to be spawned. So other things besides the player that are allowed to be spawned on the network. Okay. And at the moment we only have projectiles. Okay. If later on we wanted to, for instance, have the nice effects added, then we might have another object that we add, another prefab that we add that's an effect prefab. But at the moment the only thing that's spawned on the network is the projectile. So we just have a quick look at our tank and our projectile. So our tank is a standard object. The tank script we'll look at in a second, but the tank has a network identity. It has a local player authority, which means that the person that's kind of running the game has control over this object. So in other words, when you spawn it, it's the person, it's the local player, the player that's controlling the game, that has control over this particular object. It has a nav mesh because that's how it moves, and it also has a network transform, which is what tracks the object's position, rotation, and scale on the network, and obviously a collider. And then we have our projectile, our bullet, which again has a network identity. This time nothing unchecked because we want it to be controlled and controllable by everything. Okay, we don't want it to only exist on the server. We don't want it to be local player authority. We want it to exist everywhere. Has a rigid body, and then we have a projectile script which you can read through, which doesn't do anything, particularly special. We'll look through it again in a second. Okay, if we go back to the network manager. The last thing on the network manager you might notice is a HUD. This is again Mira's built-in HUD. This is the kind of LAN host button, LAN client button, LAN server button. These are for joining. It uses Unity's now very old UI system, so it's obviously really important that it's updated. And one of the things that's included within the project is an updated version that doesn't look very pretty, but still had the same thing, but shows you how to actually override. The nice part about these network managers and network HUDs, they are overrideable. You can completely override them. And that's what this updated network HUD does. Okay. And then we have our network start position, which again, built-in Mira script, which allows you to configure where things start on the network. Everything else is just as you expect from any normal Unity project. So if we look at some scripts, okay, what we're going to do, we'll look at the tank script first, okay, and we'll go from there. Okay. So I'm just going to open the tank script. Okay, so let's go up to the top. So the tank script is using Unity Engine AI, because we can use nav mesh, UI, because we can use UI components, and of course using Mira. Okay. The tank has a nav mesh agent. Okay. It has stuff to do with movement, okay, and it has a set of stuff to do with firing. Okay, so the key, the projectile, the space where it's actually projecting, shooting from. Okay, and then we have some stuff to do with health and UI. Okay, so most of this is relatively straightforward. Okay? You should have seen it. Been from Unity, you should have seen it before. The sync var hook equals name of set health. Okay, make sure that this health value, okay, is set as a sync file, so that's synchronized on the server and from the server. Okay, and it means that any time that value is changed on the server, okay, this function, which is just down here, okay, is actually run with that new value. Okay, so if that value changed on the server, okay, this is run on every client. Okay. We have some help text, so the help bar in the game is just very, very simple. Okay. We have 5 chevrons across the top, nothing fancy. Okay. Local UI and loose text. Okay. And then we start to see things that are slightly different. Okay. So starting with this onStart server. onStart server literally says, similar to how it started when the game is first started, okay, this is when the server is first started. So when that object is first created on the server. Okay. Set health to be the health value, so in this case 5. Okay. And then we call this function. So our health string ends up with being at first an empty string, and then for each piece of health, I guess, for lack of a better term, we add a single dash to it, okay? And then that health text is updated, so the actual text of the TextMesh Pro object is updated. Okay? And then we say if that new health is now less than or equal to 0, lose, and we can say update the health text to lose, right? And if is local player, so if you're on the local player, disable the tank controls. Okay. This bit is one of the tasks for you to do, so some tasks associated with this. One of the tasks is for you to actually update and make it so that instead of just sticking a simple lose message across, you actually get a better option. Okay. And how you do that is up to you, but it's about making it look a bit nicer. Okay. In start, we say if it's a local player, so if it's not something that's being controlled by the server, we can actually get the loose text and set the camera follow to follow this particular tank object rather than any particular tank object. If we're not a local player, we don't want to control it. Okay. We can get our horizontal, so we can rotate it round, fairly standard, transform.rotate. Okay. Vertical, so forward and backwards, W and S by default. Okay. Get the direction we're facing, okay, because we may have rotated. Okay. And give the navmesh agent, okay, a velocity, okay, to say go forwards, okay, the maximum of, right, for vertical from this whatever you've inputted, okay, and 0 times agent speed. Okay. And then we have stuff for shoot, okay, which is command fire. Okay. So commands are called on the server. Okay. So we have command fire. Okay. So we have a projectile that's instantiated. Okay. We tell it to ignore collisions with the thing that shot it, because otherwise you get the weird thing of the tank being able to shoot itself. Network server dot spawn. So we access the static network server because there's only ever one network server, okay, and we tell it to spawn this new projectile that we've created. Okay. And then we have RPC on fire. Okay. So RPCs are called, okay, on any observer, okay, on that tank, Okay. At the moment, it's not in use, but you may find a use to it. Okay. So this is called on every client that's watching it, so every client besides this one, basically. Okay. And then you have a command, another command. So commands are run on the server, okay, to change health. Okay. So this is used if we need to change a health value. Okay. And then we have a standard on trigger enter, which says if you're the local player and you collide with a bullet, okay, send a command to change health. So there's quite a lot going on there, okay, and take some time to review it in your own time. Okay, add some comments in, okay, and then move on. Okay. So the nice part about it is you can actually see all of the different code for different objects, okay, and you can, if you wish to, update and you can inherit from these. Okay, so the updated network HUD, for instance, okay, this is a file in here. So this gives you, okay, when you start up, okay, this new blue background. Again, one of your jobs is to make it look a bit nicer, tidy it up, perhaps change the buttons, add a title, add a background. So it's not just a blue background. Okay? But each of those buttons in this panel is connected to a script. Okay? So it pulls some of the behaviors from the network manager. Okay? So we say we have this new network manager, okay, which is a required component, okay, and we say cache that, okay, and then we have a whole list of things. So if there's no network client collected and the network server's not active, okay, make sure that you don't start a host or server on WebGL. WebGL cannot run a host or a server due to the way that which it's basically security checking WebGL. So it can connect to other devices, but it can't be run as a host or a server, so because it can't have incoming stuff. We have some code for starting a host, so we're checking if the client is connected and the server is active. Okay, if it's not, is a client active? Okay, if there's no client active, no client connected, no server active, then start a new network server. Okay, start a new network manager. Okay, otherwise stop the client. Okay, and again we have code to check to see if there's a client active or server active, and if it's not, do things like stop clients. Okay, we have code to check to see if the clients are ready, okay, and there's some examples out there of readying up, for instance. There's again starting a server, okay, stopping the server. Okay. Most of the code is about checking the various things that we want to check before we just start or stop. Okay, and it's about starting and stopping or showing and hiding GUI, okay, and making sure that actually if various different things are happening, right, you have appropriate error messages. Okay, and this is just a revitalized version of the original network manager that you can then extend and you can change. And you can change some of these. Okay, but more importantly, because actually this is just a front end, whatever you do to this, as long as you don't change any of these button, the kind of on edit string or on button press or on click, I should say, you can make it look however you like. Okay, so that's a whistle stop tour of how Mirror's set up. Okay, the key thing is this tank script, really. Okay, and taking into account, starting the server and what happens when you start the server. When do you check to see if it's a local player? Okay, when do you update? When do you send commands? All that sort of stuff. Okay. It's really important that you take the time to look through, take the time to read through. Stop and start this video as many times as you possibly need to. Okay. There are some tasks to go along with it. Okay. First of all, starting off by cosmetic things, so tidying up in game and joining GUI, so making it a bit nicer, a bit neater, a bit clearer. Perhaps using some of the tank models that are within here to actually set up four different prefabs, okay, and then changing the network manager, okay, or creating a new network manager to ensure a new prefab is added each time. Okay, so for instance, you would need to, if I can find it, so you'd need to change this on server add player so that each time round it goes through and changes to a different prefab. Okay, create some power ups that would need their own network transform and network identity. Implement a score system that's synced over the network. Okay, and then if you do all that, okay, a chance for you to create your own network game that's kind of themed around something you like. So you could do quite easily something like a first-person shooter. Okay? You can do something like keep changing the tank game. You could do a racing game. Try and keep it simple and something you can add on to, and keep it very focused on one or two mechanics. Okay, and if you need help, ask. Good luck, and I'm really intrigued to see what you come up with.